There was a knock at my door last night. Soft. Careful. I wouldn't have opened it if it hadn't been for the silence that followed, a silence too heavy to ignore. When I pulled the door open, my breath caught. She was standing there. Same dark hair. Same eyes. Same nervous fold in her hands. But she died 5 years ago. I buried her. I saw her casket lowered into the earth. And yet, there she was, alive. Or something close to it. She didn't smile. Did not cry. She just looked at me and said, "Hi." I couldn't speak. I could not breathe. I just stepped aside. And she walked in. Not a word more. No explanation. Just the sound of her footsteps crossing the floor I once cried over, thinking I had never hear them again. That's how it began. The night my dead sister came home. I used to look at her and feel like I was looking into a softer, stronger version of myself. Emily was everything I was not: bold, brilliant, unpredictable. We were twins, but people never confused us. Not because we looked different. We didn't. We had the same sharp jawlines, same wide brown eyes, same laugh. But where I shrank, she shined. As children, we played mirror games. She'd stand in front of me, copying every blink, every twitch, until one of us broke into laughter. But sometimes, she didn't stop. Sometimes, she'd keep staring long after the game was over. Like she was not copying anymore. Like she was studying me. Or maybe waiting for something. There was a moment I have never told anyone about, not even our parents. We were 10. Emily and I were in the attic, digging through old costumes for Halloween. She found this cracked hand mirror with a silver frame. She held it up and stared at it for a long time. Then she turned to me and whispered, "This one doesn't show both of us." I thought she was joking. But her face was pale. A few days later, she told me she had dreams. Strange ones. Of waking up in someone else's body. Of being in two places at once. It's like, "I forget which one of me is real," she said once, sitting at the edge of her bed. I laughed it off back then. I told her she watched too many movies. Our bond was complicated. Sometimes I felt like she needed me more than I needed her. And other times, I felt like I was nothing more than her shadow. But even when we fought, even when she locked herself in her room or shut down completely, I always knew she was there. She had a way of sitting in silence that still filled the room. When we turned 17, she changed. Quietly, gradually. She smiled less. She'd stare into mirrors longer. She stopped drawing the fantasy sketches she loved and started writing in these small black notebooks she never let me touch. She'd flinch when people said her name, like it was not hers. I didn't understand it then. I just thought she was going through some weird identity crisis. But now, I wonder if she was preparing. Preparing for something. The last photo we ever took together still sits on my dresser. It was our 18th birthday. Emily's arm was around my shoulders, and her eyes were vacant, like she was already leaving. When I look at it now, I see something else. A warning. A girl holding on to her reflection for one last time. People say twins are born from the same soul split in half. But what if one half doesn't want to stay? What if it was never truly human? I think I always knew something was wrong with her. Not evil. Not dangerous. Just wrong. And last night, when I saw her again, she didn't feel like a missing piece returning. She felt like a mirror I had broken, now putting itself back together, with me inside it. It was raining the day Emily died. Not the soft kind of rain that feels cleansing or romantic. No, this was cold and cruel, falling like punishment from the sky. I remember how loud it was against the windshield as we drove. She was in the passenger seat, humming something under her breath, staring out at the blur of trees. We were barely speaking that week. A fight, though I can't remember what about now. Something small. Something stupid. That's the part that haunts me. She asked me to take the back road that morning, said she liked the silence there. No traffic, no people, just winding paths and overhanging branches. She said it calmed her. I didn't argue. I wish I had. We were almost at the bend when she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're not real?" I glanced at her, confused, but she was not looking at me. Just straight ahead, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my hands tightened on the steering wheel. Like, Maybe you're someone else's version of you. Like you're being remembered instead of living. I didn't know what to say. I just laughed nervously and turned up the heater. She didn't speak again. And then, she was gone. It happened so fast. A deer, maybe. A flash of brown and white on the road. I swerved. The car hit the rail and skidded into the ditch. When I came to, the passenger door was open, rain pouring in. Emily was not there. I screamed for her. Ran into the trees like a madwoman. My arms bled from thorns, my throat from shouting. But there was nothing. No sign of her. Just that mirror-like silence in the woods. The police found her body 3 days later, washed up in the river nearly 6 miles downstream. They said she must have hit her head when she was thrown from the car, wandered off disoriented, and drowned. I never believed it. She was a strong swimmer. She hated rivers. She used to say they remember things. The funeral was small. Closed casket. I was not allowed to see her. Mom said it was better that way. Dad couldn't even speak. I just stood there, hand shaking, pretending I still felt like a whole person. But I didn't. Something inside me cracked wide open the day we buried her. I stopped going out. I dropped out of college. I slept with the lights on. I started writing letters to her, as if she could still read them. Sometimes, I'd find them gone the next morning, and I'd tell myself the wind took them. But I never left the window open. Everyone told me it was time to move on. She would not want you to live like this, they'd say. But none of them understood. Emily was not just gone, she had been taken. Something had pulled her out of this world like a string from a sweater, and now the rest of me was unraveling. Months passed. Then years. I stopped writing. I stopped speaking about her. I packed her things into boxes and shoved them into the attic. I thought if I ignored the hole she left, maybe it would close. But holes don't close. Not really. And sometimes, at night, I'd wake up certain that she was in the house. The faint creak of the floor outside my room. The soft rhythm of her breathing. I'd get out of bed, call her name. Nothing. But I always felt her just beyond reach. Now I know why. Because she never really left. And last night, she came back to finish what began on that road. After the funeral, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt empty. And that was somehow worse. People expect grief to scream, to sob, to break plates and slam doors. But mine just sat beside me quietly, pressing its weight into my chest like a hand that never moved. The silence was unbearable. It started with little things. I had pour 2 cups of coffee out of habit, then pour one down the drain. I had pause at the hallway before turning right, toward her room, then remember. I couldn't bring myself to go in. I kept the door closed, the knob untouched, like opening it would release something I was not ready to face. Mom barely spoke. She tried, I think, but every word sounded like it was being filtered through broken glass. Dad went back to work after 2 weeks. He didn't talk about Emily. He didn't look at her photos. He acted like she'd never existed. But I couldn't do that. I talked to her every night. Not aloud, just in my head. She'd always been the talkative one, so it felt natural to imagine her answers. I had asked her what she thought about the news, about my dreams, about the books I was reading. At first, it helped. Until it didn't. About 6 months after she died, the silence changed. It was not just grief anymore. It was something else. It started watching me. Waiting. I began hearing faint tapping behind her bedroom wall. Always 3 soft knocks. Sometimes at 2 a.m., sometimes just before sunrise. I thought it was pipes, maybe the house settling. But it was always 3. Like a question left unanswered. Then the dreams began. At first, they were memories, the 2 of us playing in the yard, swimming in the lake, pretending to be mirror versions of each other. But they grew darker. In one, I was chasing her through the woods, but no matter how fast I ran, she stayed just out of reach. In another, she stood at the foot of my bed, soaked in river water, whispering my name. I had wake up with her voice still echoing in my ears. One night, I woke up crying and found a small wet footprint on the floor beside my bed. I tried telling Mom once, about the dreams, the noises. She gave me this hollow look and said, "You have to stop looking for her. She is gone." But that's what scared me. Because I was not looking for her. She was looking for me. By the end of that year, I felt like a hollow shell of who I used to be. I walked, talked, and smiled when people asked, but inside I was rotting. People pitied me. They thought I was weak. They didn't know the truth. I was not mourning Emily anymore. I was waiting. Because the silence that once filled our home was not silent at all. It whispered. It remembered. And it wanted something. Every time I passed a door, I felt it breathing, not just behind the wood, but beneath the floor, inside the walls. Like the house was keeping a secret it couldn't contain much longer. And then one night, I stood outside her room and touched the knob for the first time in over a year. It was warm. The night I touched her door, something changed. I didn't open it. I just stood there, hand on the knob, heart pounding. Then I walked away. But from that night on, the house stopped pretending to be normal. The first sign came the next morning. I walked into the kitchen, and the kettle was boiling, even though I hadn't turned it on. Steam filled the room, and for a second, I thought I smelled Emily's shampoo. Lavender and something else. Earthy, like wet leaves. Later that week, I found one of her drawings sitting on my desk. I had packed them all away months ago, sealed in a box in the attic. But this one was different. It showed two girls holding hands, one smiling, one crying. The background was dark. A red door stood behind them, cracked open. I asked Mom if she had gone through Emily's things. She looked tired and confused and said no. When I checked the attic, the box was still sealed with the same tape. Then came the music. Emily used to love a specific piano melody. Slow, sad, and soft. One night around 3 a.m., I woke up to it playing faintly. We didn't own a piano. I held my breath and listened. The music came from the walls. I sat there in bed, frozen, until it stopped. When I turned on the light, nothing was there. But the air smelled like her again, faint and fading fast, like a memory trying to stay alive. I started hearing her voice. At first, it was faint, like a thought passing through my mind. Then it grew clearer. She called my name once while I was brushing my hair. I turned so fast I dropped the brush. No one was there. Another time, I heard crying from inside her room. I pressed my ear against the door, and it stopped the moment I touched the wood. I stopped telling anyone. Not because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, but because some part of me was starting to believe it too much. I didn't want to wake up from this, not if it meant losing her again. I became obsessed with mirrors. I started noticing strange things. Once, I walked past the bathroom and saw a reflection still standing there after I had moved on. Another time, I was brushing my teeth, and for a second, the girl in the mirror was smiling. But I was not. I began writing it all down. Every sound. Every smell. Every flicker of movement. I filled 3 notebooks in 2 months. I didn't know what I was trying to do. Record evidence? Prove I was not crazy? Or maybe just hold on to whatever piece of her was still lingering here. Then the knocks started again. Not on the front door this time. On the wall behind my bed. 3 soft taps, just like before. Always in the middle of the night. Always when I was too afraid to answer. But the scariest thing was not the sounds, the smells, or the music. It was what I found in my phone. One night, I opened my gallery by accident and saw a picture I hadn't taken. It was a photo of me sleeping, taken from the foot of my bed. In the corner of the frame, barely visible in the dark, was a figure. She had long black hair. I stared at it for hours. Then I deleted it. Then I wished I hadn't. I told myself that if it happened again, I wouldn't answer. I had locked the doors, turn off the lights, pretend I was not home. I had ignore it, no matter how real it felt. I promised myself that. But when the knock came, I broke that promise. It was just after midnight. I was awake, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was too quiet, and my skin felt cold even under the blanket. Then, 3 knocks. This time, they weren't on the wall. They were at the front door. My heart started racing. I didn't move. I waited. A full minute passed. Then I heard it again. Knock. 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 Soft. Careful. Familiar. I got up without thinking. My hands moved on their own. I walked to the door like I had done it before. My legs felt heavy, like I was underwater. When I opened the door, I was not surprised. She was standing there. Again. But this time, she looked tired. Her skin was pale, her eyes darker than I remembered. But everything else was the same. Same old hoodie. Same worn sneakers. Same posture, like she was unsure if she belonged here. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her shoes quiet on the wooden floor. I closed the door behind her, afraid to blink in case she disappeared. We stood there for a while in silence. I stared at her, not sure if I should hug her or run. "You're real," I finally whispered. She nodded once. "I think so." I didn't ask her where she had been. Not yet. I just watched her move around the house like she never left. She touched the edge of the table, looked at the books on the shelf, sat on the couch. It was like watching a memory walk around. She didn't speak much that night. I offered her water. She said no. I asked if she was cold. She said, "Not anymore." I kept trying to study her face, every detail, hoping to spot something wrong, something fake. But it was her. Even the tiny scar under her chin, the one from when we were 6 and she fell off her bike, was there. Finally, I asked, "Why now?" She looked at me for a long time before answering. "Because they said I could." I didn't know what that meant. "Who?" I asked. But she just looked away. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch across from her, watching her stare at the blank TV screen. She didn't blink much. She didn't fidget. She barely breathed. When I finally dozed off just before sunrise, I had a dream. In it, she was standing at the end of a long hallway made of mirrors. Each mirror showed a different version of her. One crying. One laughing. One bleeding. One staring directly at me, eyes wide and empty. She held out her hand and said, "It's time." I woke up with a gasp. My room was cold. I ran to the living room. She was gone. But the front door was still locked. She disappeared, and for days, I tried to convince myself it had all been a dream. A grief-induced hallucination. Maybe I had finally snapped, and my mind was giving me what it thought I needed. One last night with her. But then I found the blanket. It was the one I had seen her wrap around herself as she sat on the couch, the one with the little embroidered stars in the corner. It had not been there before. It was folded neatly on the armrest, exactly the way she always left it. That was when I knew I hadn't imagined her. So I did something I had not done in years. I went back to the police report. I pulled the old folder out from the back of the drawer, where I had buried it under bills and expired documents. I sat on the floor and read every word. It all felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. But one line stood out this time, something I hadn't noticed before. Body recovered was severely decomposed. Identification confirmed through belongings found nearby. I froze. They never confirmed it through dental records or DNA. They didn't even let us see her. They assumed it was her because they found her bracelet. But what if it was not? I called the officer listed in the report. He had retired, but he still remembered the case. I asked him if the body was positively identified. He paused, then said, "Honestly, no. The river had done a number on it. But it matched the timeline. And the bracelet, well, it made sense." I hung up without saying goodbye. I couldn't sit still after that. My head was spinning. My heart felt like it was trying to get out of my chest. I started tearing through old boxes, journals, files, anything that might prove she was alive longer than they told us. That's when I found it. One of Emily's old sketchbooks, hidden in the lining of her suitcase. It was filled with drawings, dark, strange ones. Most were of mirrors. Some were of doorways. But one page stopped me cold. It was a sketch of our living room. And sitting on the couch was a girl who looked like me, staring at the front door. The date in the corner was 3 weeks after she died. I flipped to the last page. It was a mirror again, but this time, my face was drawn inside it, not Emily's. Below it, she had written, "She'll only remember what they let her." I dropped the book and backed away like it had burned me. What did she mean? Who were they? And what did she mean by letting me remember? I started questioning everything. The accident, the timeline, even the funeral. I asked Mom if she still had the death certificate. She looked startled, almost afraid, and told me she didn't know where it was. She always knew where things were. Later that night, I had another dream. This time, I was sitting in the attic. The room was filled with mirrors. One by one, they started to fog up. And in each reflection, I saw Emily. But in every version, her eyes were different. Not wrong. Just not hers. When I woke up, I was holding the sketchbook in my hands, even though I had left it in the closet. The more I searched, the less sense things made. And yet, deep down, something inside me already knew. The truth was not just hidden. It had been rewritten. She came back again. It was 2 nights after I found the sketchbook. I didn't hear her arrive. No knock this time. I woke up in the middle of the night, and she was already in the house, standing at the window, looking out into the dark. I didn't scream. I didn't even ask how she got in. I just sat up slowly and said her name. She turned to face me, and something inside me went still. She looked the same face I knew since birth, but the expression was not hers. It was empty. Too calm. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was like someone had practiced being her but hadn't quite mastered it. "You left the window unlocked," she said, but I hadn't. I nodded anyway. She sat at the edge of my bed like she used to when we were kids and couldn't sleep. I waited for her to speak again, but she didn't. She just stared at the wall, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Where have you been?" I asked, softly. She turned her head, slowly, as if the question surprised her. "I don't know the words for it," she said. But it was quiet. Cold. And loud, too. It pulled me apart, then put me back differently. I didn't understand what that meant, but I didn't ask again. After that night, she stayed. She didn't sleep, at least not that I saw. Sometimes I'd find her standing in the hallway for hours, unmoving, just staring at nothing. Other times, she'd hum strange melodies I had never heard before. The tune made me feel dizzy, like it was pulling at something in my memory I couldn't reach. She did not eat, either. I'd leave plates of food, but she never touched them. I asked her once if she was hungry, and she shook her head with a small smile. "They gave me something else," she whispered. Her voice was changing, softer, thinner, almost like a whisper layered over itself. At times, it felt like someone else was speaking through her. She had sit in the living room, watching old home videos without sound. Just watching. Never blinking. Once, I caught her writing in one of my journals. I picked it up after she left the room. There was just one sentence, over and over again. "You aren't supposed to remember." Another time, I walked into the kitchen and found her standing in front of the mirror on the wall, touching her face gently, like she didn't recognize it. When I called her name, she smiled and said, "Do you ever feel like you're the copy, not the original?" Her presence began to change the air in the house. It grew heavier, like the walls were pressing inward. The lights would flicker when she entered a room. Clock stopped. My phone refused to hold a charge. But the worst part was not her silence, or her behavior, or the things that no longer worked. It was how natural it started to feel. Like part of me had been waiting for her to return. Like my life had always been off balance without her, and now, finally, it made sense again. But it didn't feel right. She felt like my sister. And at the same time, she didn't. I couldn't pretend anymore. She was back. She was real. But whatever was living in my house, sleeping in my sister's old bed, moving through our memories like it owned them, was not just Emily. Something was wrong. And I needed answers. I started with Mom. She had avoided talking about Emily for years, but I pushed her this time. I told her everything, the appearances, the dreams, the photo, the sketchbook. At first, she looked like she might cry. Then she went completely still. Finally, she said, "There are things you weren't supposed to know." I asked what she meant. She walked to her closet and pulled down a dusty old photo album I had never seen before. It was full of hospital records, ultrasound images, and notes, all dated months before Emily and I were born. I flipped to one paper. It was a report from the hospital, stamped confidential. It said, "Twin pregnancy. Anomalous duplication noted. One fetus removed due to irregular neurological formation. Secondary mass continues to develop. Observation required." I didn't understand. "What is this?" I asked. Mom sat down slowly. They told us there might be complications. That one of you might not be normal. That the two of you weren't forming separately. That your minds overlapped. I stared at her, heart thudding. They called it a mirror birth, she said. One child born into light. One into shadow. I felt cold all over. What happened to the other one? She didn't answer right away. We were told one wouldn't survive. But you both came out crying. We didn't ask questions. We just loved you. I asked if Emily ever knew. She nodded. She found this when she was 15, Mom whispered. Everything changed after that. It made sense now, the way Emily had stared into mirrors, how she used to draw shadows with faces that weren't hers. She'd always said strange things, but I had never taken them seriously. And now I was starting to think she hadn't died. She had returned to something that had always belonged to her. That night, I went to the attic. I knew what I was looking for, even if I didn't want to. In the far corner, buried beneath boxes, was an old black suitcase, the one Emily had used when we were kids. I opened it slowly. Inside, I found drawings, journals, and something wrapped in cloth. I unwrapped it to find a hand mirror, the same one from our childhood. The silver frame was cracked now, but it still reflected clearly. Only, it didn't show me. It showed her. Emily. She was staring at me through the glass, not in real time, but in a moment frozen from long ago. She was younger. Smiling. Holding something I couldn't see. On the back of the mirror was a message scratched into the metal. Only one of us was supposed to survive. I dropped it. I couldn't breathe. All this time, I thought I had lost my sister. But maybe I was the one who didn't belong. She was waiting for me when I came down from the attic. Sitting on the couch, legs crossed, the same way she used to during movie nights. But there was no TV on. Just her, staring into the empty room. I stood there, heart pounding, the broken mirror still clutched in my hand. Emily, I said, my voice dry. She looked at me slowly, and something flickered across her face, like recognition, but not relief. Like something watching me from behind her eyes. You found it, she said softly. I nodded. You knew all along, didn't you? She tilted her head, the way she always did when she was about to say something too big to understand. They told me the truth when I crossed over, she said. When I died, or when you thought I died. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. I was not meant to stay here, she continued. Not fully. I was borrowed. A piece of something else placed in your world, so you wouldn't be alone. I stared at her, frozen. What does that mean? She stood up slowly. You were the only one. I was the shadow. A reflection made real for a while. But they took me back. They wanted to fix the mistake. I shook my head. You're not making sense. I was not born the way you were, she said. I was shaped around you. Formed from your thoughts. From your fears. You were the center. I was the echo. A chill crawled across my skin. All those years, we lived together, I whispered. We laughed. We fought. You were real. I was real to you, she said. And that was enough. She stepped closer. I didn't move. But I was not supposed to become more than that. I stayed too long. I remembered too much. And when the balance shifted, something had to give. She touched my arm, and her hand was ice cold. That's why they came. That's why they let me return, not to live again, but to return what they took. I looked at her, eyes stinging. What did they take? She paused, then said, You. Silence fell like a curtain. What do you mean? I whispered. You've been fading, she said. Since the night I came back. Haven't you felt it? The confusion. The dreams. The missing time. They're not accidents. They're pieces of you, slipping. I remembered the nights I woke up standing in strange places. The meals I didn't remember cooking. The missing entries in my journal. What happens now? I asked, already fearing the answer. She looked sad. Truly sad, for the first time. They only allow one, she said. One to live. One to stay. My voice shook. And you've already chosen. She didn't answer. But I could feel it. Somewhere deep inside me, something was shifting. The world was folding in on itself, gently, like paper turning into ash. I thought I was the one who had lost my sister, but the truth was worse. I was the copy all along. I couldn't feel my hands. They were still attached to me, I think, still hanging loosely at my sides, but they no longer felt like mine. My breath came in short, shallow bursts. The room looked the same, but everything had changed. The air, the light, her. Emily stood in front of me, silent. Not cruel, not cold. Just still. "I don't want to disappear," I whispered. She nodded. I didn't want to either. She held out her hand. For a second, I didn't move. The whole world narrowed to that one gesture, fingers outstretched, palm up, like she was offering me peace or maybe an end. I remembered being kids, holding hands to cross the street. That old instinct flared in my chest. But now I knew I was not crossing a street. I was crossing out of something. Where would we go? I asked, my voice shaking. She looked past me, toward the hallway mirror. Back, to where we were never separated. I followed her gaze. The mirror had fogged up, even though the room was cold. And behind the glass, something shifted. A hallway. Long, endless. Lined with doorways, all slightly open. Light flickered at the far end, like candle flames in wind. "That's not real," I said, but I already knew I was wrong. "It's more real than this," she replied. I wanted to run. But where? What part of this world still belonged to me? My memories weren't mine. My past was rewritten. My body was slipping. I could feel it, like my skin didn't fit anymore. "You can stay," she said softly, "but you'll keep breaking." I stared at her hand. It looked human, but the warmth was gone. Maybe it never had been there to begin with. "If I go with you, what happens to me?" I asked. She tilted her head. "You become whole." I wanted to ask what that meant, but I was afraid of the answer. Will I remember this? I said instead. She smiled faintly. "Only the part that matters." I looked back toward the mirror. It was wide open now. I stepped forward, almost against my will, drawn by something ancient and invisible. Not fear. Not even curiosity. Something else. Something deeper. I stopped just short of the glass. My reflection was not there anymore. Instead, Emily stood in my place, the version of her I remembered best. 17, laughing, alive. She reached toward me from the other side. Behind her, I saw others. Silhouettes. Watching. Waiting. "You can choose," she whispered. "But not for much longer." I turned back to the room one last time. The couch. The books. The photos. My life. And I realized I didn't recognize any of it anymore. I had stayed here long enough. I took her hand. And stepped through. The first thing I felt was cold. Not the kind that makes you shiver, but the kind that wraps around you, soft and thick, like fog in your lungs. There was no floor under my feet, but I didn't fall. No sky above me, but I could feel space stretch endlessly in every direction. I was not scared. That's what surprised me the most. Emily stood beside me, quiet as always. She didn't look at me. She was watching something ahead, a distant shape, maybe a door, maybe just more fog. But we moved toward it. Together. Like we always used to. I don't remember how long we were there. Time doesn't behave the same way on the other side. Eventually, there was light. Not bright. More like a memory of light. Warm but unfamiliar. It settled into me like something that had been missing. Then I was home again. But not quite. I woke up in my bed. The room was quiet. Still. The morning sun spilled through the curtains. Birds outside. Wind in the trees. The world looked normal. Felt normal. Except it was not. I walked through the house in silence. Every book was still on the shelf. The picture frames untouched. The kitchen smelled like toast and coffee, though I hadn't made either. A cup sat on the table, warm. And then I saw it. The mirror in the hallway. I walked toward it slowly, heart thudding again for the first time in what felt like forever. I stood in front of it. My reflection stared back. Same face. Same hair. Same tired eyes. But I knew. It I me. Not exactly. I raised my hand. The reflection followed. But there was a delay, just a second too slow. I smiled. It did too. But the smile was not mine. It was Emily's. I do not know how I knew. I just did. Like something inside me had shifted, moved over, made room for someone else. Or maybe replaced. I live my life like nothing happened. I go outside. I talk to people. I laugh at jokes. I answer texts. But every night, I sit in front of the mirror and watch closely. I wait for that moment where she slips, where the reflection doesn't quite match. And sometimes, I catch it. A blink I did not do. A tilt of the head that feels off. A breath I do not remember taking. The thing is, I am not scared anymore. Because maybe she is not just inside the mirror now. Maybe I am.